Friday morning, can't control it. Fired up and counting every minute. Hands are shaking, eyes are burning. The time has come, yeah, this is not a warning. The week was just so long, we had to let it go. Our problems disappeared, we're not tied up anymore. The weekend is here. Sunday calls, we are sick and tired of it. Up and down, can you feel it? Up and down.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Johansson show. It's Kurt, and today I'm joined by a special guest all the way from Hong Kong. It's Michael Su. Michael, thank you for coming on.
No worries, thank you for having me.
Really excited. When I started doing this adventure into the Southeast Asia scene, you was somebody that kept getting recommended and somebody I was always wanting to reach out to. So and I know you're doing some exciting stuff recently, so it'll be good to have a chat about your career and what you've got going on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, sorry, you were saying?
So, like, why wrestling? Like, what made you think, you know what, I want to be a professional wrestler, especially when
Yeah.
there may not have been much of a wrestling scene where you were?
Yeah. I guess I'll try not to talk about this one for too long, but I think people close to me know, but I actually grew up in New Zealand.
Okay.
I was very young in mainland China, maybe like 6 or 7 years old, and my family immigrated over to New Zealand. And I think the first time I ever saw professional wrestling on TV might have been WCW. And like my memory of the show was incredibly vague. I do remember Sting's face, Sting, Goldberg, Scott Steiner, but obviously like couldn't put a name to those faces back then. And it wasn't until I left New Zealand in 2004 to move to Hong Kong that I started watching wrestling regularly. I guess like my first exposure to it really was there was a channel here called Star World that used to show taped episodes of TNA Impact, Explosion, and some of like the old shows. And I remember the very first show I watched on Star World was Chris Sabin versus Michael Shane from back in 2004.
Yeah.
I just remember that being such a cool match. And like it was the first time I'd ever properly watched it with an idea of what was going on, and I think that it just got me hooked. And the more I watched TNA, the more I got into it. You know, guys like AJ Styles, Abyss, back then Monty Brown, The Amazing Red, like so many good wrestlers on that roster. And I actually watched TNA, I think, for about a year and a half before I even knew WWE existed. And I only found out about WWE because I think it was one of the summers of high school. I went back to the mainland because I do visit family there every now and then. And we went to this really dodgy fake DVD sales store where they basically just like pirate a whole bunch of stuff and put, whack it onto a CD. And I think I picked up a series of WWE DVDs that recorded everything from just after the Royal Rumble in 2004 until like, after Backlash. So I was just getting into it when Eddie had beaten Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship at No Mercy that year. And yeah, I just got more and more into it. So I was always hooked. And as like the years went on, I started watching more like Japanese wrestling. There's a ton of stuff like Pro Wrestling Noah stuff on YouTube that was available back then. So just I kept in touch with wrestling from around the world, kept watching, and it wasn't until maybe 2017 that I thought I'd really give this a go, because I like growing up I'd always been like a scrawny kid and everything, but like after university I decided to maybe take my fitness a bit more seriously. And the more I got into it, the more I thought to myself, maybe I was really starting to not enjoy my full-time day job. So I'd always known about wrestling in Hong Kong. Actually, like around the time I graduated from high school, I did get in touch with Ho Ho Lun back then to see if there's anything I could do just to get myself involved, but there wasn't. And that was, I think, around when he did his first UK tour in, I think, 2011. But I didn't, obviously, it was something I never looked back into. And then I went to a show with a few friends of mine in 2017. I think it was one of their King of Wrestling shows here that they hold annually, is around like July. And I went to a show, and I just remember like I'd always known about wrestling in Hong Kong, but this is the first time, watching it. And the more like that show went on, the more I sat there and thought to myself and looked around my mates like, why don't I try give this stuff a go too? So yeah, after that show, I didn't waste much time. I reached out to Ho Ho right away. And unfortunately, they didn't take me at first because or he just came back from NXT, and I think he was focusing on a project in Macau around then, so he wasn't really hands-on. And I think at that point, Jason Lee had become or was on his way over to Dragon Gate, so they didn't really have a lot of the more seasoned guys here to do the coaching. And I didn't really want to take no for an answer and wait around, because I was just like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. So I went online, looked around, and I came across, Middle Kingdom Wrestling on just on like a random Google search. And like, I think I was 2 weeks after that, like close to my birthday, and I think, September 2017, that's when I booked flights and went up to, traveled like 5 hours north to the top of China to Harbin, never been there before. And off I went, and that's how I got into it. I think I spent about a week there training with some of the guys, and I just thought, like, I don't want to look back. So
who was at MKW at that time of you training? Was Zombie over there at that point?
No, Zombie Dragon hadn't arrived in China at that point. Neither was Uncle Money. This was like very early on. I think like some of the guys up there, Cam Ferguson was another guy I was training with at the time that we're just about to get in. So I think it was a New Zealand wrestler called Triple T. Like, he was the one like leading the training up there. But obviously, like, they don't run shows that often, and it really, like, up there is more of like just a thing they do, like maybe recreationally. That at the time MKW hadn't really taken off and gotten to where it is now. But yeah, I spent a bit of time up there, and I think it was Adrian that said to me, like, look, if you're serious about this, I can hook you up with one of the guys that lives a bit closer to you, Ash Silva, who lives in between like Hong Kong and Shenzhen. So we used to meet up like once or twice a week to do a few like training sessions. So that I guess that was like my initial, how I started getting training and everything.
Wow. How did you find training then? So this is something you've loved. You used to go to the dodgy DVD stores to get stuff, and then you're trying it in the ring, maybe on the mats to begin with. So how did you adapt to the training?
I just kind of like just went with the flow, really, because like when you first get into wrestling, I think like you probably know this quite well. Like, it's all like rolls and a lot of the basics at first, and I just tried to do my best. Whenever I got in there, like, I didn't even know if I was doing it right half the time. But it's just the more you start doing it, the more you get a feel for how to move around, where to put your feet, where to look. And yeah, I didn't dislike it, I must say, because I did play a little bit of rugby before when I was younger, and by a little bit, I really do mean a little bit. But the physical contact was, like, in my mind, more or less similar. So, I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, when you're playing rugby, you're taught to, like, you're used to falling, I guess, and getting hit.
Yeah, used to falling and using your legs to drive, like something that people put a lot of emphasis on.
Yeah. So how long had you been training until you made your debut?
I started training in September 2017, and I wrestled my first match in March 2018. So it was just a little bit over half a year.
Yeah.
But you'll find this a bit shocking, but the first time I stepped into a ring was actually in December in 2017. This is, I think, one of the first MKW Shenzhen shows. And I reffed the entire show, having never stepped foot into a ring before that, nor had any ring experience. And luckily I did okay. And that was a very memorable show for so many reasons. But yeah, I just felt at home in the ring. I was in there just trying to recall like everything I'd ever seen on television or on YouTube and just try to apply it, and luckily it worked out.
Yeah. What was your debut match like?
My debut match was, like, obviously back then, my comments on it were, maybe I did all right, that this looked good and that looked good, but you obviously don't think of the match as like a whole picture. You think moments, because you're so desperately trying to remember what happens next. But Looking back at it now, it wasn't good. It definitely was nowhere near my best performance in the ring. But yeah, like nevertheless, incredibly memorable. Everything that I imagined wrestling to be, from the moment you step out from the curtain, you pick up a microphone, or even that taking that first bump and having people cheer for you if you're a babyface. These things, like, they really resonate with me. So yeah, I loved it.
Did you adapt to work in the crowd quite well?
I've probably in my career, I've only worked as a heel like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And everything else is like neutral or babyface. So I think I kind of naturally caught on with it because I never thought to go, any other way with expressing myself out there. So yeah, I guess, it's a part of something I really enjoy, being in the ring, trying to get the crowd behind me.
Yeah, definitely. And with that being with MKW, you'd worked Dragon Gate, is that correct, in 2018? Kong
Okay,
show?
so yeah, it's a bit all over the place, but at the second MKW show I did, that's when I met Bitman for the first time from HKWF, and he suggested that maybe I can join along with one of the training sessions, and then I joined just the training sessions as like a bit of an outsider, but like since then I've basically been like training with him in Hong Kong, and obviously at the time Ho Ho had zero knowledge of me coming along to the training session. So the first time I met him face to face, despite having traded emails like 8 or 9 years ago, was a bit of like a "who are you?" like what's going on kind of moment. But yeah, I got to know him, and the more I trained with HKWF, the more I guess he was open to the idea of putting me like on a show locally. And yeah, it happened really quickly. So I went from having match number 1 in, I think, like March 2018 to, by the time October rolled around for Dragon Gate's first ever shows in Hong Kong, I think that was maybe match number 5, or yeah, match number 5 or 6, and like, gosh, I was not ready. It was I didn't have I didn't get given the chance to work with any of the Japanese wrestlers. I was just working with some of the HKWF guys, but even then, it just felt like way out of my depth. And must say I did struggle a little bit, but it's experiences like that that you really learn from.
Yeah. What was it like working with Ho Ho Lun then? Something you tried to do to begin with, didn't really work out. You've still gone to
Yeah.
business another route, and then it kind of came full circle. How was your
Yeah.
interactions with Ho Ho?
No, he's been great. Like I always, like, whenever people ask me like who I got trained by, I'll say that I really got my start with MKW, but it was Ho Ho that kind of after I met him, he really picked up on small things and like roughed out the edges a little bit for me.
Yeah.
And being able to work with someone that obviously at that point had already had so much experience, probably the most experienced person from where we are anyway, because I'm sure you're well aware of this, but a lot of the independent scenes that started around Southeast Asia was all influenced by Ho Ho. I think him going down to Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore. So yeah, like that kind of experience really helped me out at the initial stages.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's brilliant.
How's it grown over? Like, what's it been like seeing the growth of the wrestling scene over the last couple of years in Southeast Asia?
It's obviously up until COVID happened, like early this year, like nothing short of incredible, I must say. Because wrestling had always existed here, and there was probably always a passionate fan base for it. But if you dial, the clock back a little bit, and you look at what it was like in about 2000, like 8, 9, 10, it was non-existent. I do know that wrestling was around in Taiwan a lot longer than that, but obviously it never really grew into anything big. But and then SPW came along, Malaysia Pro Wrestling got set up. The scene was quite dead in Korea for a while, but then Shiho and PWS, reinvigorated things a little bit, so to speak. And then obviously MKW rapidly expanded in China over the last around 3 years.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden everything just came to life and stuff started connecting quicker and faster than we'd ever seen before. And next thing you knew, like, I had and plenty of other wrestlers in the region, we had chances to go overseas and work a show maybe once or twice a month, and that was already a lot compared to if you look back to like 2012, 13, where you'd be lucky if you had 4 shows annually. So yeah, it's really incredible, and I really admire everyone that's been involved in the organization process of the whole scene. Like it's quite amazing to see like where they are given where they came from.
Yeah, and obviously you was training 2017, making your debut 2018, but then by 2019 you're flying all over the world, and that is a very rapid progression from yourself. You mentioned PWS. I know you'd gone to go to South Korea, and at this point you're the MKW World Champion. So what was it like that? What, you'd been a year and a half into the business, and you end up becoming the MKW World Champion?
Like, honestly speaking, maybe a bit unexpected for me, because when I first started wrestling, I'd maybe just set, stepping in the ring and performing like a couple times a year as like an initial goal. But I guess every single time I went back, I thought, I had more to give. Every single time I left, I thought I had more to basically force myself to prepare. I trained hard. One of the biggest turning points for me was obviously, being introduced to the Ho Ho and HKWF and seeing that where they are and wanting to become, maybe even bigger than that. But I actually, very early on in my career, I think maybe like immediately after my debut match, I saw the advert on Facebook, I think it was, for the New Japan Pro Wrestling LA Dojo. And they were doing camps. They would specifically say that it wasn't a tryout. But obviously, I think it was a bit different when you got there. But I applied for the December camp, which was, I think, right at the end of the year. So I applied in April, and I think I didn't hear back from them until October in 2018. So at that point, maybe right after that Dragon Gate show I did. And it wasn't really until then that I went, oh, okay, like maybe we can get a bit more serious about this, because it was just a punt, really. Like I had no idea that they would come back and say that, look, you're welcome to come. But yeah, I think that opportunity to be able to go there and train at the LA Dojo for a week, that was really, really eye-opening, because it kind of like really, gave me an idea where I was compared to where I should be, because there were guys at the camp that had been wrestling like 6, 7, 8. One of the guys, Barrett Brown, like 10 years. And it was like, like it was here and here. Like I was so far away from the rest of them. And I came away from that week thinking to myself, like, I really want to improve. And I think that also gave me a bit more opportunity here, because I can use that. I'm the first ever Chinese-born wrestler to have trained at a New Japan Pro Wrestling dojo, and I kind of took that, and Ho Ho saw that I was willing to kind of pay and get myself halfway across the world just for a week of training. Okay, look, if you want to be serious, I can put a few people in touch with you and see what they can do to get you outside of Hong Kong and wrestling a bit more.
Oh, that's amazing. Like, who was it that was training you in the LA Dojo? I know Shibata's running it. Was Shibata running it at the time?
Yeah, he was. So him being the head coach, obviously, but the day-to-day stuff is largely run by the 3 young boys there. At the time, one of them, obviously, Carl Fredericks, is no longer a young boy, but it was Carl Fredericks, Clark Connors, and Alex Coughlin. And they would be like hands-on involved in every single training session. So I think it was like almost like 4, sometimes 5 hours a day, like conditioning work every day. Then you do, your roles and your basics, and they never went really beyond teaching us basic lockups and basic bumps and just simple stuff like that, because there's a way they like things to be done, and they just wanted to kind of take everyone and kind of transition you towards being able to follow that Japanese style, which I thought was really amazing.
Yeah, definitely. So when was this? Was this December 2018, you say?
Yes, December 28th. Yep.
And then it was like, obviously 2019 was the year things started going a lot more rapidly for you. Again, we mentioned MKW World Champion, and then you got the opportunity to go all over the world, really, defending it.
Yeah.
What was it like in South Korea? So at this point, had you only wrestled in China?
No. So South Korea was maybe one of the last destinations for me that year. So if I'll talk about 2019 in a nutshell, so it'll kind of connect to that PWS show. I started the year working two shows in Hong Kong, and then I think it was about a week or two after that there was a big Macau show that I'm sure I don't know if you know about, but King Michael and Bitman were a part of that show, and they got to wrestle Jay Lethal and Colt Cabana.
Wow.
And Sonjay Dutt was actually supposed to be in Colt Cabana's place, but his plane had to have an emergency landing in Canada. He could never make it out because it was too cold. I think that was the case. But I helped out at that show, and at that show I'd met Kai from Japan for the first time. Hikaru Shida, who I also met at that show. So like that was for me in many ways like big exposure as well. After that show, we started that's when things really accelerated. I wrestled in Harbin for MKW again that March against an American wrestler called Hyperstreak, who at that point had done some work for like ROH, CMLL. I think he was heavily involved in OWE for a period of time. And after working with him, there was the Dragon Gate shows in May, but right before that weekend, I teamed with Zeta and wrestled in Nepal as a part of one of the MKW Belt and Road shows. Yeah. And then as May rolled into June, that's when I headed over to UK and did that. I won the MKW Championship. I think this was, I can't really recall now. I think this was around right before I went to UK, so maybe a couple of weeks before that. This is after the Dragon Gate shows.
Yeah. I believe from my research, I think it was like around June time you'd won it, and then was it July you came to the UK?
Yeah, so it was that, and then straight to the UK. And I was actually there like for personal work, like, you know, the company that I'd worked for, but along the way, Ho Ho was there at the time on tour, and he said, you know Voodoo, like I know Voodoo, let's get you over on one of the shows, and he just threw me in the main event of one of his shows against CJ Banks and Jack Griffiths. But I learned an incredible deal from those two in that match I wrestled. That was really fun. But after that, it went crazy. It went from UK back to Hong Kong, and then I did a show in the Philippines with Ho Ho and Bitman for Manila Wrestling Federation, MWF. Then I came back, and then there was a local show here in August, and then I was off to Japan the next week to work for Pro Wrestling Alive. And then after that, I think it's towards the end of August, I had a championship defense in Korea. So basically at this point, I think that I'd had the most number of matches ever like that year. Like for me, like it was way above expectation. But yeah, that Korean crowd was really unique. I'd almost gone out there thinking that they'd be more like the Japanese. Obviously a lot of cultural similarities, but they were loud and they were very passionate. From the second I walked out, they just gave me a very different energy, and it's similar to the crowds in like Hong Kong and across Southeast Asia. Everyone's very vocal. Very fun to perform in front of.
So at this point, what matches of yours were you proud of, like the ones that you'd done? You mentioned you really enjoyed the triple threat you had here in England.
Yes.
What other matches at that point of your career was standing out for you?
One of my personal favorites was the first time I had a match with Ho Ho Lun back in January in 2019. Obviously I'd been wanting to wrestle him for a very long time, and that match really sank in. The match where I won the MKW Championship I think that match was against Big Sam and Cam Ferguson up in Harbin. That was really memorable because, obviously winning a title is, something that everyone wants to do when you get into wrestling. And the main championship for one of the only promotions in China, like I guess I couldn't really ask for anything more. But that was amazing. And oh man, there's a few in Hong Kong in May. Actually, I think I have the poster right behind me if you can see it. This was the poster for Dragon Storm in spring. It was 2 back-to-back shows in May last year, and on the second night, I got to team with Yamato and UT from Dragon Gate, and that was to be able to work a match like that and learn from guys that had that much real professional experience was really eye-opening for me. And that kind of changed the way that I looked at wrestling and how I understood everything to be. And also the match in Korea that really stood out. Lee Junyan, who I had that championship defense against, is a very good personal friend of mine, and we get along really well. And I think in the ring we had pretty good chemistry. So yeah, that really stood out.
Oh, brilliant. So I know you mentioned like Malaysia. So I think you've had a few shows with MyPW.
Yes.
What's it been like working in Malaysia, and like just recently seen Shaukat, he's doing APAC Wrestling now, so Asia Pacific Wrestling. So first, like, what's your thoughts on APAC and the premise of that being Asian Pacific?
I think it's really cool because whenever one of these shows, be it Singapore or Malaysia, obviously being like right in the middle of Southeast Asia, you get workers from all over the region. Yeah. So the very first time I went down to MyPW, I did skip one international match. So this was early March 2019. I went down to MyPW with Ronald Lee from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And on that show was Andrew Tang from Singapore, Ken Warren from the Philippines, Greg Glorious and Smart Dave, both from Singapore as well. Yeah. And we had Emi Sakura there against Phoenix. Yeah. So yeah, there's like a wide array of international performers that were obviously more experienced than some of the guys locally, but that kind of dynamic and what it brings to one of those shows is the crowd always expects something. Yeah. So that venue that they had back then was very, very nice as well. Yeah, I'm in the kid. No, I'd really wanted to meet him at that show, but I think he just left to go study in Australia. So he wasn't there. But that venue and the production quality of the show that they put together, that was it was really impressive, and it really exceeded anything any kind of sudden loss for words, any kind of expectation I had for the show. But I left thinking that there was a lot of potential in Southeast Asia, because obviously, previous years before they'd done stuff with AWE, where Ho Ho, brought along Kai and Tajiri. So that was something that I think the fans remembered, and they obviously want to see the product locally being able to go back to kind of where it was. So yeah, it was good. It was good.
So with the announcement of like APAC Wrestling, and it seems like that, from what you've just talked about, when on that show you was on Ken Warren, Smart Dave, and all the best in the region coming. What's your hopes for what APAC could have on the Southeast Asian wrestling scene?
Yeah. So in my mind, it might turn out to be something similar to a project that someone in Hong Kong was trying to put together with UWA. Locally here, we have a guy called Bob O'Kane was trying to do like he was trying to create like a big kind of maybe promotion isn't the right word for it, but a series of shows where he'd be bringing a lot of Southeast Asian wrestlers across. And I think maybe APAC Wrestling, I don't know too much about it at this point, but I think the ultimate goal might just be to bring a lot of performers from the region and get like a big show going. And I think the moment we're allowed to do that again, once COVID dies down a little bit, or things ease up a bit in terms of travel restrictions, it might be really cool to put together for the fans. But I mean, for now, like I've got, I'm excited. I don't know, like I said, I don't know much about it, but I could see, big things coming out of that.
Brilliant. You mentioned Eman and that you'd just missed out, like speaking to him because he'd gone to Australia. Is he somebody that you're hoping to have share the ring with?
Yeah, definitely. The last show I did before I headed over to Dragon Gate in late January was in Malaysia. I got to work against Orion Black and Wham Bam Bellows, big Bellows. And on that same show, Emin main evented. This guy is very good, and I'd definitely like to step in the ring with him at some point. But yeah, that'd be very cool.
So you mentioned Dragon Gate, and I've seen that's a lot of stuff you'd been doing. I'd seen you'd been teaming with a fellow Brit, Martin Kirby, whilst he was out there as well.
Yes.
So obviously, I think it was after that tour, Martin Kirby came back and announced his retirement from professional wrestling. And
yeah, unfortunately.
What was your experiences working with Martin like?
Yeah, it was really funny actually. The Dragon Gate Dojo. So after I got there, this whole like thing was so new and so unbelievable to me. But when I got there, I was put in the same room with Ho Ho, Martin, and a couple of Mexican performers they had down there. But yeah, the first time I met Martin Kirby, he was in his pajamas, like getting out of bed, like around evening time. But yeah, we got along really. I guess being like one of the only other fluent English speakers down there, like it gave us a lot of common topics to talk about, and I learned a great deal about pro wrestling from him in the month and a half I was there, because I think almost every other match I did, with the exception of 2 singles matches against one of their young boys, Taketo Kame, were all tag matches. And if it wasn't tagging with Ho Ho, it would be tagging with Martin. And every single time I was in there with one of them, I was like a sponge, just soaking up an incredible like amount of knowledge at every match.
How did Dragon Gate come about? Like, how did that opportunity to go there for a month and a half?
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be longer, but I got that opportunity because Ho Ho over here in Hong Kong, and obviously because Jason Lee's been there for a period of time, they've been bringing Dragon Gate workers to Hong Kong. And there's always been a Japanese businessman here who's got a very good relationship with the Dragon Gate CEO. And I think after having met him several times at different shows, towards the end of 2019, actually, it was for me to reach out and see if he could give me a recommendation to go on a tryout tour to Dragon Gate. And that's eventually how it came about. But I think Ho Ho sat me down like halfway through 2019, and he just went, look, like, what do you want to make out of this? Because I think out of our bunch here in Hong Kong, you probably have, the least amount of restrictions, and you can probably head over to Japan and try make this something, you do for real on a full-time basis if you like that. And obviously I didn't say no. I was very excited by it, and next thing I knew, I got my visa work done, and I was off like in late January.
Brilliant. So what was that experience like for you in total then, like being out there wrestling in Japan, being with the Dragon Gate family?
Yeah, it was brilliant. I think on so many different levels, it was a really big challenge for me. Obviously, I've always surrounded myself with enough Japanese culture through the form of anime and TV shows, but my conversational Japanese is very basic at best. But being in an environment where that's always been spoken around you, it forces you to look at things and understand things from like a very different point of view. Seeing how the young boys truly operate there, because I think I was a bit lucky in the sense that even though I'd gone as a novice and a young boy, I didn't have to pick up as many of the the normal young boy routines, because they really do keep that for their own Japanese young boys. But just seeing them go through that and seeing the amount of work they put in, whether it's to in training or just preparing for a show, like it's incredible how much work they put in. Being backstage, with the entire crew before a show, I think maybe looking back at it now, I think I spent every single passing moment just a nervous wreck, because that is just the way I am. I put a lot of pressure on my own shoulders, and I always try to exceed. But it was very different, and it kind of brought me back down to earth, because maybe I was lucky enough to be given a lot of opportunities throughout 2018 to 19, and I'd risen to the top relatively quickly than some of the other guys might have. But being put into Japan, I was really all the way back down at the bottom of the totem pole, and learning things, in training, I felt like quite out of my depth sometimes, but it's all, within my own expectation. And I learned so much from, the trainers, and being able to perform at different venues and seeing how to work that Japanese crowd, because that is not an easy task. But yeah, it was just really unfortunate the way it ended, because I think as things were starting to a little bit more for me. I'd mainly been working on what they call like a match zero, which is like the dark match before like a show starts. But towards the end, I was maybe getting one or two opening matches, and it was unfortunate because I kind of tweaked my left ankle in a training session where I got to take a little break. But when I came back and got back into it, that's when the big injury happened. So that was, I think it was night 2 of the Champion Gate and Osaka shows back in March 1st.
Yeah.
And yeah, at the very end of a match, just I think was out of position, and Kento Kobune went to grab me from behind. His shoulder came in and just pressed my right foot into the ground, and my foot being trapped and falling backwards, my body just kind of went in opposite ways, and that's when it happened. Like I heard a very noticeable pop, and I just felt like something isn't right. And they took me to the doctors, but the doctor was still like a bit unsure as to what the exact diagnosis was. I was put on painkillers and everything, but ultimately, like, we decided that I wasn't getting any better about 10 days later, and that's exactly when they announced all the show cancellations due to COVID, because they were out for like a good like almost 4 months, I think. And I left on the 11th, and followed by Martin Kirby leaving on the 12th, because that's when he found out that he'd just be trapped and there wouldn't be shows going on. And he can be involved in the training every day, but obviously I don't think that's what a lot of us are there for. We're there to work matches. So yeah, he made the decision to go home. Maybe like in the back of his mind, he decided that this would be his last kind of tour ever. And I honestly, if you ask me, based on all our interactions and like the time we spent there and every time we talked, I had absolutely no clue that he was planning to hang it up, so to speak. So it came as
I don't think anybody did. So I think he was like, can't wait to go back over there, and then a couple of days later, he was like, actually, I'm done. And everybody that I've spoken to about like Martin always says Ali, he's one of the most versatile wrestlers I've ever seen. Whether it's making you hate him, making you love him, making you laugh, making you anxious, like he's so versatile. And if he's found peace, life after wrestling, then like all props to him. But as the fan of his work, like like selfishly, I want him to come back, because I think he's incredible and he offers so much.
Yeah, he is. He really is a very good performer. The time of my life, whether it was wrestling against him or teaming up with him, just every time the way he communicates, he's quite a laid back guy, and I don't see him as being aggressive at all. And when he gives advice, you listen, because he just had a way of talking that made you really want to pay attention to what he had to say. But outside of that, he was a good lad. Like, we had a few good laughs. He was very fun to be around as well.
What was the best bit of advice you got from Martin?
Best piece of advice I got from him, I'm gonna have to think for a second, because I can't really. He the training session, I wouldn't say it's like a specific piece of advice, but it's kind of just watching how he conducts things, because the training sessions that we would have in the Dragon Gate dojo would obviously be all the young boys with whoever the head trainer was that day and whoever wanted to join. And Martin was always the first guy up down there ready before everyone else. And sometimes towards like halfway through one of the training sessions, the trainer would just ask Martin to take over. And obviously, there's no common language. The Japanese aren't very adept with English over there. They do, in terms of like calling a match and like basic things they understand. But the way he slowed things down and tried to teach the British way of wrestling, be that in chain wrestling or some spots, and the way he conducted himself to make people understand what he really meant, that was very impressive. And that's something that to me, I wish I had a lot more of earlier in my career. And for me, like the biggest, actually maybe going to Dragon Gate and performing there in front of a crowd wasn't the biggest aim for me. It was more to get in-ring time, because despite having flown all over the world and done this and that, I definitely feel like I'm still missing a good chunk of in-ring time that a lot of wrestlers like in the UK, US, Japan, Mexico get much more than over here. And it's actually a bit of a sad case in Hong Kong because in other regions, I think in Singapore, it's been recognized as a sport by the government, but so they've got maybe some extra funding.
Yeah, that just happened in Malaysia, I believe, with Shaukat.
Yeah, yes. So they'll be subsidized by the government, so they probably will have a venue and places where they can access the ring very easily. Over here, I don't know if you know this, but Hong Kong has, I think, per square foot, the most expensive rent in the world, regardless of what it is.
Oh, wow.
It's at a point where our ring is put away in a safe house until it's needed for shows. So we normally just train on judo mats, and that makes all the difference in the world, because if you're able to be in a ring multiple times a week, obviously you'd be a lot sharper with your rope work, your position. There's just too many things. Like I could never get to the end of it, but yeah, being in a ring is essential. So yeah, that for me in Dragon Gate was one of the most important reasons why I felt I was there.
Yeah. How's the recovery going now? Am I right in thinking it was your right fibula that you'd?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so it was a fracture to the right fibula, and I think to patch it up, they put like a plate and I think like 7 or 8 screws in there to align it. It's feeling a lot better now. Obviously now what we're in like mid to late October. The surgery was done on March 30th, because I had to come back and obviously self-isolate for 2 weeks before I could see a doctor. So I was at home with at the time I didn't know it was a broken leg, but it was the turnaround between the injury and the surgery was an entire month.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was in pain every night. I'd get woken up in the middle of the night because it hurt so much.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just a really badly sprained ankle, but then I went online when I came back. I was searching. The bruising had gone all the way up to like the back of my knee, and I was like, yeah, that's not just an ankle sprain. So I got it fixed, and luckily the surgery went really well. And I think within about 2 months, I was able to walk without the big moon boot, and then I'd started doing rehab, pretty intensive rehab actually at a center in starting June. So we're like almost 4 months into the process. I'm like a lot of my basic strength and like mobility and like being able to squat, that kind of stuff is coming back. But when it comes to a lot of my in-ring moves and offense are based around drop kicks and jumping high kicks and things like that. And I think I need to get a lot more balance and strength and explosiveness back in that right leg. But I think everything's on the right track.
Oh, good. And there's never a good time to be injured, but if there were, it'd probably be now. With
that's what. Yeah, I think that was what a lot of guys were saying to me. Ho was like, yeah, it was a good thing you're injured now. Like everything's cancelled. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be injured if I had a choice. But that's life. These kind of things. It was really like an unexpected halt to everything that was going so very well for me up until this point. So yeah, it's a bit of a it's a bit of a thing to moan about, but I think I'm over the initial stage of depression. I'm just really trying to get back into it now.
Oh, good. So, like looking forward and stuff like that. Obviously, Japan seems to be a big desire of yours. Obviously, you went to the LA Dojo. You've had your tour with Dragon Gate. We've seen WWE start doing tryouts in and around Southeast Asia. Been looking at India, and there's always been rumors of like an NXT Japan or NXT Asia.
Yeah.
Is that something you would be interested in, whether it's in Japan or if it's going to be touring throughout Asia, a bit like what they're doing with NXT UK? Is WWE a goal for you?
Yeah, definitely. I actually, at the end of the Dragon Gate shows last year in May, Coach Bloom was actually in attendance. And it was he's incredibly intimidating as a human being because he's so much taller than me. But I remember coming out the curtain and just seeing him like in the crowd. You instantly pick out where the big American dude with a bald head is sitting. But I got to actually have a bit of a chat with him, and he obviously just wished me well and on with everything. But around the time I came over to the UK for that championship defense, they were hosting tryouts in Shanghai in China, which unfortunately I missed. Ho told me that I was on basically the top of the wish list for the people they like to see at the tryout. So unfortunately, I couldn't make it. But hopefully, you know, when they can and if they can next time they come around, I'd love to be a part of that. At this point, going forward, like you said, I don't think I have like a very concrete plan. Obviously, the immediate goal should be, or you know, maybe to get back to Japan. But then again, right now, you know, opportunities are so scarce. If anything comes along that, you know, is really worth sinking my teeth into, then I think I'll really go for it.
Yeah.
Because I've been at home for a couple months now, thinking about, you know, what the next step might be, and I think getting back into it is one of the most, you know, reasonable options I have.
Oh, good. So, what other like goals or destinations? Is it coming over to the UK again, or AEW, this New Japan as one of the Young Lions, or back to Dragon Gate? Like, what are your other goals in wrestling to where you'd be happy if they came about?
Coming back to UK, always open to that, but I think maybe not at the top of the list. Right now, you know, if Dragon Gate is still a feasible option, then I'd love to go back and, you know, continue basically where I left off. Because I know they just brought in a bunch of new recruits, and, you know, I have absolutely zero issue with going back and starting from that level again, because I need that familiarity and time again in the ring to just kind of find my feet again. The LA Dojo is actually something that I have considered, but at the same time, it's not easy to travel over to the US at the moment. And I actually spoke with one of my friends there at the moment, and he said that they've got a very close bubble that they keep just for the tapings and things they have over there. So that again, even Shibata-san is right now in Japan, and they do their training sessions virtually with him leading it. So things are a bit difficult over there. One thing that I was actually very seriously looking at, and I hope to reach out at some point, is I hold a New Zealand nationality because I obviously immigrated over there before, but there were talks of a New Japan Pro Wrestling New Zealand dojo officially opening up.
Yeah.
And I think that is just the conversion from Bad Luck Fale's own Fale Dojo.
Yeah.
And obviously them putting the brand on there. And they were going to, I think they were going to host tryouts maybe around May, but obviously everything got called off due to COVID and everything. And I haven't seen anything new, but that is potentially an option for me too, because it's not that Dragon Gate isn't a goal of mine. It's that, you know, I'm lucky enough to be afforded a couple of different opportunities and different, you know, routes to think about now at present. And yeah, if it's worth exploring, it always is worth exploring because it's New Japan Pro Wrestling. So it's something that I'll definitely give some thought to. But I think, you know, I'm kind of sitting here and torn between whether or not I get back to another regular day job and do the Asia Indie thing for another year or so, or if I just, you know, fully recover and get back to it right away. I think that's something I'd want to do more. But yeah, so many things, like, you know, obviously AEW being new, I can see sometime in the, you know, in the near future them setting up a wrestling school, because I'm pretty sure that doesn't exist yet. But once they get a school going,
they've got Cody Rhodes and QT Marshall that have got doing like a Nightmare Factory. It's
okay.
where a lot of the initial AEW Dark people was coming from when lockdown was at its worst. So they started using a couple of those guys and girls, and they've made the most of it. A couple of them have got contracts from that. But as an official AEW place, I don't think they have.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, obviously, if something over there is set up anytime soon, that might be worth looking into. But out of all the places I could possibly travel to right now, I think US can maybe be ruled off just because of how rampant COVID is still going on over there. Yeah, it's quite scary over here. Obviously, starting from last October, we've had to keep pushing shows back because last October was when the Hong Kong protests were at its peak. I think that we scheduled a big show in autumn, so I think maybe exactly 1 year ago this time on the weekend of like 18th or 19th, something like that. We were supposed to have another Dragon Gate show, but literally the weekend before that was when cops opened fire with a live round for the first time.
Wow.
And I think, yeah, that really just put things off completely, and they said, okay, we're just going to scrap the show, look at things again in January. But by the time we came around to January, that's when COVID started in China and started coming down here, because this is one of the first places that was kind of hit.
Yeah.
Then next thing you know, it went from China down to here, across to Southeast Asia, across to Korea and Japan, and then it just went global. So we were meant to have Hong Kong Wrestling Federation's 10-year anniversary show. I think this was like maybe towards the end of January, and then that got scrapped and pushed to April. Which obviously my time at Dragon Gate was supposed to be 3 months, and then the idea was Ho Ho, myself, Jason, and the rest of the whoever was selected from Dragon Gate to perform at that show would all go back, do that show, and then my plan was to see like where things would go from there. But that obviously has been put off now, and I don't think the government is going to be letting any kind of live performances or shows take place for the foreseeable future. So I think like you can effectively rule all of 2020 out, and I don't know at next year like when that chance might come around. So
yeah, I've seen that MKW they've been doing their blast off series. Is that is that something you'd be able to get to?
Unfortunately not. At the moment, to get into the mainland, you would still need to present a test and have a valid reason for going there. And even if you do go, you'd have to quarantine at a hotel for 2 weeks before you're allowed to go off.
That's not feasible, really.
Yeah, not feasible, really. And Harbin being so far away, like I'd have to cross, because there's no direct flights from Hong Kong to Harbin. You'd have to go from Hong Kong over the border to Shenzhen and then fly up. So I'd have to quarantine there first. As I'm getting closer to full recovery now, I think I'm maybe still about 30% away, but the more I'm getting closer, the more I'm thinking like, I'd really like to be a part of those tapings, but obviously COVID up there has died down a lot. That's why they're able to run shows like that. But I think anywhere else it's just not possible. Yeah, so the whole 2020 has really put wrestling like over here kind of on hold, so to speak. Like guys are doing what they can, across Southeast Asia to promote their own like platforms and do a few gaming streams from what I've seen, but it's so far away from what it was at this time last year. Yeah.
No, it's really difficult. I think it's affected everywhere across the world, essentially. I think it's only been those big TV companies that have been able to do it properly.
Yeah.
And still, you've even seen they've had their issues. I know there's been a couple of companies here that have been trying a few shows, but then now we've been having more restrictions put in place as well in certain cities because their rates are just going up and up and up again. So this whole year's been a write-off essentially in terms of wrestling, which is a shame, but it makes me excited for when it can go back to normality, because I think not only the fans but the talent are just going to be so hungry and so they're going to have the adrenaline, and I just think the atmosphere and the whole like wrestling industry is going to be fantastic. I think people, not saying you took it for granted before, but I think wrestlers and fans and everybody in between that's involved will appreciate it a lot more because they've had to experience life without it.
Yeah, exactly like you said, life without it. Like if we talk about the UK for a moment, like I'm a big football fan, so I'm a Chelsea fan, but I've been dying to watch football again, and like just seeing football matches without fans in the crowd and playing in an empty stadium where you can hear all the players and the managers talk, it's so strangely different. And obviously like things like to prevent COVID from spreading, you don't get fans back in the stadium, but at the same time they're encouraged to go to the pub and watch the game. I feel like it doesn't particularly help the cause of stopping the disease from spreading. So it really puts things into perspective. And like my view on COVID probably is until like a vaccine that actually works comes out, there really won't I don't think there'll be like a proper end to this. Like over here it really died down maybe like 2.5 months ago, and I think there was a solid period where there were like maybe 0 cases for 2 to 3 weeks, and all of a sudden it just came out of nowhere, and then it hit the peak. There was like 120 cases a day. Wow. And when you think about Hong Kong as a city, like it's 7.5 million people crammed into such a tiny dot of a space. Like there's more people in Hong Kong than there are in the entirety of New Zealand. Yeah, that's a really interesting statistic that I like to tell people, like, to get some, like, get an idea of what it's like living here, but it is so cramped. And that's, obviously SARS having broken out here before in 2003, like, people here know what it's like. So when you go out on the street, like, people here are quite good with, wearing masks. Like, everyone's got one on. People do follow the rules, but there is still, like, a certain amount of travel between here and mainland for business purposes, and there are a few, like, imported cases. But even now, like, most things are reopened again, but with a lot of restrictions. Like, restaurants and bars will close at 12, and a lot of, like, group gatherings are still not allowed. Like, beaches are still closed.
Yeah.
There's still, like, around 10 to 11, like 13, 14 cases a day, and I just don't really think it's going to go away, because we're heading now towards what we call winter over here, which is like summer for you guys, not in UK. But
Oh no, it's still we're heading into winter now as well.
yeah,
Yeah, we've been October, and
yeah,
it's like we've opened up schools and things like that, and
yeah.
it's at this stage where everybody's got a flu anyways.
Yeah, people will get sick, and then you won't know if it's COVID or something else. So I fear the worst might be yet to come for this year, actually. So it's just like fingers crossed and touch wood to that. Hope it really doesn't get to that stage. But Hong Kong's gone through 2 different stages of lockdown, because things reopened, gyms reopened, and then it closed again. Now it's opened again. But yeah, it's much better. But I'd much rather be here than, like, a lot of other places in the world at the moment. It's just it's a hot mess.
Yeah, definitely. Well, where can people like follow your journey? Where can they find you on the different social medias?
Yeah, so I am probably most active on Instagram. So my handle is Michael JZSU. It's an acronym of my actual Chinese name, but I've same one on Twitter, which I actually use much less. I didn't really realize I had to use Twitter until I got to Japan, because my mate was like, all the Japanese fans, they don't use Instagram, they use Twitter. So yeah, the same handle, Michael JZSU. I think those are the 2 that you can find me on the most. I do post quite a lot of stuff regarding my recovery and how my rehab is going on Instagram a bit. So yeah, that stuff is available on there.
Oh, brilliant. And again, like, if somebody was wanting to check out, say, some of your work at MKW, what matches should they try and find?
Matches at MKW, I would recommend anything from my reign as the champion. So it could be my match against Zombie Dragon at Shenzhen just in December 2019, or my match against Lee Junyan in Korea. I'd probably put those 2 at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Because obviously for myself, I think those are some of my better performances. Outside of that, actually, some of my favorite matches were from the time that I spent in Dragon Gate, and unfortunately, some of them were from live shows, so there's no video footage available. But if you'd like, I've got a copy somewhere on my phone of the match I did teaming with Martin against Ho Ho and Super Shiza at Korakuen Hall.
Oh, yeah.
So it's something I'd definitely be open to sharing, because I think that's available on the Dragon Gate network. So I maybe might have to ask for permission first.
Yeah. Oh no, that'd be brilliant. Even just like for my personal viewing, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be good. But no, Michael, like, thank you for coming on. We'll definitely have to do it when the world goes back to normal. And
Yeah, sure.
it's good to see that you've got a lot of different options and a lot of different, like, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. So, like, your future, the possibilities are endless at the moment. So that's good to see. And once wrestling goes back to normal, and whether it's back at Dragon Gate or the new dojo in New Zealand, we'll have to sit down and have a chat again and see where wrestling's taking you in 2021.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Look, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time. I think you've got, with your interest in wrestling down here, I think it's something quite unique, because it really is a brand new scene that is maturing, bit by bit, year by year. And with that, you see the emergence of, new guys like myself and a couple other up and comers. So I think it's a good space to watch out for like the next couple of years. And yeah, for sure, like, I do hope wherever I land next is, somewhere good from not only my own development, because I think for me, the end goal was always, probably try to get as far as I can in wrestling, and then hopefully bring it back home and do something Ho Ho did before, because it's just, I love this so much, and I know there are people here that want to get into it, but it's difficult because the Asian culture, especially in Hong Kong and China, isn't as open as other places that wrestling exists. Even in Japan, it's so different, but it's still widely accepted as a sport. But over here, people really have zero knowledge about what it's like. And I think just from the shows that I've performed at here in Hong Kong, I brought so many of my friends that have been wrestling fans when they were younger, maybe not very passionate, but just knowing that there's wrestling there and having that exposure meant that every time there was another show, it would guarantee a full house because they would all bring their friends and it would just be amazing. So no, thank you for being interested in our little wrestling bubble over here. It's something that I hope can really grow in the coming years.
Nah, hopefully, and I keep saying to everybody else, like, if you're complaining about the stuff that you're watching, just open your eyes and have a look at that. And I think that's why I've been doing it, because I've just been amazed by the different stories and the different cultures and where wrestling's still so passionate about it. And it's good to see the scene grow. So if I can do anything of getting new eyes further afield onto the product or onto like the individual wrestlers like yourself, then like I'm happy to be doing that. And hopefully, like post COVID, the scene can continue in the direction it was originally heading.
Yeah, I really hope so as well, man.
Brilliant. Well, everybody, thank you for listening and thank you for watching. Make sure you do go check out Michael on social media. Go follow him on Twitter and Instagram. If you've enjoyed this interview, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe so you're not going to miss any of the other interviews. And again, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Friday morning.